the second quarterly Learning, Teaching and Enhancement seminar. I'm going to hand over to Dr. Antoinette van der Merwe to welcome you all officially. Thank you, Antoinette.
Thank you very much, Karen, and I'm welcoming you all on behalf of our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Prof Diresh Ramjuganath, who said he will definitely join the meeting, but unfortunately is having a bit of a cough. So I was actually in a meeting with him this morning, and every time he starts speaking, he also starts coughing. So his apologies, but he will be joining us and is also really looking forward to this seminar this afternoon. So colleagues, it gives me great pleasure not to welcome just the participants to this LTE seminar, but then of course also Professor Ingrid Rewitzky. Many of you know Ingrid. I've known Ingrid for quite some time at the university, and she has been involved in educational leadership at Stellenbosch University through her roles as Professor of Mathematics since 2009, Executive Head of the Department of Mathematical Sciences since 2010, Vice Dean Learning and Teaching of the Faculty of Scienc since 2011. And of course, we also had the privilege to do the UBC course in education leadership together, Ingrid. I can't remember, I think it was 2016, quite a few moons ago, but still one of my vivid memories of us working together as students at that stage. As a mathematician, Ingrid is focused on interdisciplinary research in mathematics of computer science, co-authored 2 research monographs, published over 20 research papers, and supervised postgraduate students. She's also currently the Associate Editor for Questiones Mathematica since 2010 and serves on the IMU Committee on Electronic Information Communications since 2021. Recently, she has been engaging in the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning and is a SU Teaching Fellow. So that's wonderful to have you as a Teaching Fellow as well, Ingrid. And in 2018, Ingrid was honored with the Stellenbosch University's Chancellor's Award in recognition of sustained excellence throughout her career. So I think that is really the cherry on the top in terms of getting that award as well. So this afternoon, Ingrid will be talking to you. You see her slides up and you see on the screen as well, towards using complexity theory to guide program evaluation in the Faculty of Scienc. And as many of you know, program renewal has also now been identified by the Rectorate as one of the 7 game changers. So I think within that context at Stellenbosch University, as you also saw from the blurb, it will be important to look at different types of program evaluation frameworks. And as she'll be proposing this afternoon, is to make a shift from a linear approach of program evaluation, just focusing on inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes, but actually looking at it through the lens of complexity theory, understanding that multi-level outcomes emerging in programs. And of course, she will now present this framework to us that embeds the 5 principles of complexity theory: networks, emergence, self-organization, feedback sensitivity, and agility. With that, over to you, Ingrid. And after that, I'm going to hand over to Karen just to handle the Q&A. So colleagues, we've got the chat function. So as Ingrid's speaking, if you've got questions or comments, just throw them out there. And then after Ingrid has finished her presentation, Karen will facilitate the discussion around the presentation as well. Over to you, Ingrid. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antoinette, for your kind words of introduction. And it's a pleasure to share with you my research work that I've undertaken for my teaching fellowship. And it's been focused around this research question: how do we understand and improve the quality, innovation, and impact of undergraduate programs in science at Stellenbosch University within the South African higher education context? Our academic programs were introduced at the university to meet the program-based approach for higher education in South Africa in the late 1990s. And in the South African higher education qualifications framework, a program is defined as a purposeful and structured set of learning experiences that leads to a qualification. Programs may be discipline-based, professional, career-focused, trans, inter, or multidisciplinary. At Stellenbosch University, program renewal has been identified as a game changer for contributing towards the core strategic themes of the university's strategic framework as listed here. Moreover, a learning-centered approach is promoted in the university's teaching and learning policy. There we see learning as a partnership. We facilitate knowledge building, actively engaging the students in their own learning, and a learning-centered approach integrated across the university with also suitable resources to support this approach. In the Faculty of Science, there is one degree awarded, which is the Bachelor of Science or the BSc, and together with that we have 9 qualifiers, and each qualifier denotes a program in the faculty. We have specialized professional curricula, we have more interdisciplinary curricula, and we have broad science curricula. The BSc degree is really a formative degree where the graduate has no fixed career path. So that's opposed to a more vocational degree. Our programs are structured essentially around 2 majors.
It's a presentation.
And as part of that, there are also some electives that students do together with academic skills development through some other modules. Now, for all the programs in the Faculty of Science, mathematics is an admission requirement, but unfortunately the pool of prospective students is decreasing due to the decline in the proportion of students nationally and also in the Western Cape who write mathematics in grade 12. Moreover, among the students who meet the minimum requirements, there's also a range of mathematical proficiency. Now, 20 to 25 years beyond the time when programs were implemented and accelerated perhaps by the pandemic, there is the sense that the structured and focus on coherent curricula, formal credits, semester-long modules, notional hours, formal teaching, learning and assessment may no longer be aligned with the lived experience of our students in work and other environments. There is also a strong call for considering new practices available in a digital, globally connected world for rethinking teaching, learning, and assessment practices and spaces, where learners are co-developers and co-researchers of open, free, contextual, reinvented, applied knowledge, and for living social justice in a more nuanced, considered manner. And there is a need then for a fundamental shift from an institution-centered learning environment to a more personalized learning environment in which perhaps the academic programs are unbundled from their coherent curriculum and are offered using multiple modes and are characterized by cross-institutional and cross-cultural learning opportunities. And this picture captures post-COVID education futures in the spirit of the work of Gilly Salmon, who we had the pleasure of meeting a few years ago when we were looking at program renewal. And I would encourage you to go and take a look at this website and possibly listen to the video that accompanies this very detailed diagram of learning futures. So this means that the Faculty of Science faces important strategic decisions regarding the undergraduate programs offered within the transforming higher education context of South Africa and for preparing graduates for the future. We also need a good sense of judgment of where we are and possible futures while taking into account our academic context. There is the potential for lecturers to gain knowledge about student experiences, such as an understanding will be congruous to developing a new institutional culture characterized by genuine respect for and appreciation of diversity and difference. And our starting point is an evaluation of our programs and the learning-centered approach to our teaching and learning. Such an evaluation will need to follow a collective sense-making approach rather than a qualitative assurance approach. In the literature, there are many approaches to evaluation. 4 generations of evaluation models have been described, for example, in Guber and Lincoln, ranging from quantitative to qualitative and combinations of these. And it's always a tricky part when trying to apply such evaluation models within the South African context. Viewing a program as an educational intervention, 3 types of evaluations were distinguished as applicable for academic programs by Jan Botha in his paper of 2009. These are judgment-oriented evaluation, which is a summative evaluation to establish the intrinsic value or merits or outcomes of a program. There's an improvement-oriented evaluation, which is a more formative evaluation to identify the weak points in the program and unexpected problems. And thirdly, there was a knowledge-oriented evaluation to understand the essence of the program and the transformative learning or teaching experience. In his paper, he reports on an improvement-oriented evaluation of the undergraduate science programs and the quality of student learning that was conducted at the university in 2007 and 2008. And for this, the HEQC's program accreditation criteria were considered, and they were clustered into themes relevant for student learning. And these were the program rationale, academic integrity, student recruitment, selection and admission, learning facilitation, and assessment. An important conclusion was that the evaluation of formative undergraduate programs like the science program, this can be an effective instrument to improve student learning, particularly because such evaluations consider academic activities from the student's perspective, namely the program, and not the individual modules of different disciplines offered by different departments. Yet another approach is taking the view of a program as an open system with emergent dynamical interactions among its components and the surrounding environment. And this gives rise to what has been referred to as the CIPP model, which has 4 evaluation aspects: the context, the input, the process, and the product. So it looks at what program needs to be designed, how the program should be designed, and is the program that was designed being executed or implemented, and is the program successful. And this model captured the attention of medical and health science faculties as well as engineering faculties to make decisions regarding the improvement of programs. However, there were some shortcomings. In particular, efficiency was overvalued and students' aims were undervalued. In this talk, we're going to view a program as a complex system with 4 basic components. It will have agents, the interconnectedness of the agents, there's an environment and feedback, which will influence the ongoing evolution of the system. And the components are seen as interacting in ways to produce outputs that are not easy to predict. The link between complexity and education is not new, and Karen Cattell Holden from Stellenbosch is one such person working in this field, and she related it to the Teaching Excellence Award system. But here are 2 further references in which complexity and education are linked. The first says that if education is about fostering the emergence of learning, of creativity, of imaginative and critical perspectives, then educators would be fair in asking of complexity theory how we might set about establishing the conditions insofar as it is possible to influence those conditions for the emergence to occur. So it's about the emergence of learning using complexity theory to consider conditions for that emergence to occur. And if we understand education in complexity terms, it should not be construed in terms of preparation for the future, but rather in terms of participation in creating possible futures. So this means that we are not going to look at a program in the traditional view of a logic model where we have inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes. This approach was very helpful for understanding the relationships among resources, activities, challenges, etc. But it's really only a partial representation of a program. Since a program itself has no clear outcome, we can't say this is a mathematics graduate or this is an effective program. And there's no clear learning path or sequence of steps that need to be followed. It's really a process in the sense that the outcome and the path are developing and adapting. So an integrative approach for understanding a program as a complex system is what is referred to as complexity theory, and it focuses on the interactions of the components rather than on a component in isolation. And it has been shown that the most important insight of complexity with regards to educational change is that new properties and behaviors emerge not only from the elements that constitute the system, but from the myriad of connections between them. So how can we think of a program as a complex system? We may view a program, first of all, as an interconnected system with at least 3 components and internal diversity. So first you have a collection of modules with a flow of information or knowledge from one academic year to the next. There are specific module outcomes that need to be met. There might be requirements, admission requirements or prerequisites to go from one module to another. Some modules in the program are foundational for the focus of the program, and others form the major, which is aligned with the focus of the program. Also, we have the lecturers, we have peer-to-peer facilitators of the modules. They have a diversity of disciplinary specialities and teaching and learning philosophies. We also then have the students who are enrolled for the program, who have different levels of preparedness for each academic year, different internal paths for achieving understanding, and a diversity of ideas, career goals, and purposes. A program may be viewed in a system of systems in the sense that it is implemented within an academic context of a particular higher education institution, and that is also within the framework of policies governing the higher education sector. But this is also within the economic, political, societal context of the time. Students' learning is influenced too by many factors, including their insight, their interest, motivation, their support structures, their finances, their health, their access to technology and other things. A program is also surrounded by feedback loops. So these will influence its ongoing renewal. One kind of example could be that an effective program prepares graduates of the future. Some of those would continue to postgraduate studies. Some of those postgrads will then become academics who will contribute to program renewal, which will lead to effective programs. And there are many other feedback loops. A program is also a non-linear system, since the impact of an intervention may not be proportional to the investment of time and resources. So, for example, if we provide guidelines and support for student learning, that doesn't guarantee that our students will have a deep understanding as opposed to a surface understanding. And as we also experience, it doesn't guarantee that they will use it for their learning. A program can also be seen as policy resistant, often with unintended consequences. So, for example, incentives for high pass rates may result in teaching to assess strategies or behavioral misconduct of staff or students. Now, emergence is very key to a complex system, and researchers have looked at conditions for such an emergence to occur. And 3 key ones have been identified, namely the rate of information flow through the system, the richness of connectivity between the agents in the system, and the level of diversity between and within the schemas of the agents. So I'm going to explore this a little bit in terms of a maths program. I'm more familiar with mathematics than other programs. So students enrolled for a maths program typically work on their own and become really immersed in a maths problem with little interaction with others. So this one sort of worries, well, how does this affect the flow of information within the program as a complex system? There's also a reluctance to obtain feedback on their representations, on their solutions, their reasoning approaches, in fear of not being correct or in fear of failure. There's also the perception that mathematics is the study of complete theories with well-defined objects, axioms, and rules, a whole lot of proofs that have been around for a long time, and that there's little room for mathematical creativity and discovery. And there's well-documented such perceptions within the literature. If we look at diversity, there's really a diversity of mathematical representations and reasoning approaches within mathematics by pure nature of the knowledge structure that mathematics has. And in the formal terms, it has a horizontal knowledge structure. But also our students bring to our classes their own personal understandings and reasoning approaches. And so there is a challenge in trying to move between these different kinds of representations. Also, the many factors affect the quality of the students' learning, not to mention their conceptions of and approaches to learning mathematics, their prior experiences, all influence their learning of mathematics. And then finally, with regards to connectivity as the third condition for emergence, teaching and learning activities in maths tend to be rigidly structured around closed-end tasks and around formal roles. You'll have the lecturer, peer-to-peer facilitator, students, rather than working collectively and reflecting on the essence of the mathematical activity and being involved in the idea of abstracting, representing, reasoning, trying out things and having, as mathematicians would always say, a whole lot of failed attempts before reaching what you feel is the appropriate one. The way our programs are represented in the yearbook, for example, it looks like a suite of service modules which are detached from the research activities of lecturers, and this could be problematic for students who are within a maths program. Also, we may have limited opportunity and limited engagement for exploring interactions of ideas and exploring the links between different modules and the approaches of different students. We also might not be appreciating the maths of all cultures and the contribution that mathematics is playing on the business of making accessible the richness of the world we are in. Now, a metaphor or a conceptual tool for understanding the long-term dynamics of change in a complex system is what is called the adaptive cycle. And this comes from the biological sciences. It's been applied to ecosystems and social ecological systems. This adaptive cycle, which is pictured here, is shaped by two properties: the potential or the inherent potential of the system that's available for change, the internal connectedness or controllability in terms of the relation with the context that may impact that change. And then, of course, there's also the adaptive capacity of the complex system. And then this provides us with 4 stages. So we have the exploitation phase, we have a conservation phase, and we have a release and a reorganization phase. So there are two major transitions that happen here. So there's first a slow incremental phase of growth and accumulation of potential skills, networks, and trust building. So that's this front loop. And the back loop is the rapid phase of reorganization leading to renewal. So in terms of program renewal for a specific teaching and learning challenge, at first we might consider various possible interventions and ideas, and these can be brainstormed in this reorganization or creative phase. We might ask questions: what is desirable in terms of the possible futures? We might ask what is achievable in the sense to what degree the program can determine its own future, distinct of constraints like timetables and resources. So once the intervention is conceptualized, the exploitation phase is reached, and then there's a slow incremental growth phase during which the intervention is implemented, human capital and resources are committed, and then finally the efficiency of that program is determined, or that intervention. The intervention then matures and becomes business as usual, and that's in the conservation phase. Then as the teaching and learning context changes, for example, through student feedback or a different mode of offering as we experienced during the COVID pandemic, there will be a need to move to the release stage, during which human capital and teaching resources may be reallocated or reorganized in a way to be more effective in that context. And then this rapid reorganization phase provides the opportunity and the momentum for the program renewal for that new teaching and learning context. And for each stage of the adaptive cycle of a program, a different approach of evaluation might be useful. So a summative, judgmental, or judgment-oriented evaluation might be appropriate for the conservation business as usual phase. A formative, improvement-oriented evaluation might be useful for the exploitation phase. And then for this fast phase at the back, a more knowledge-oriented evaluation might be helpful, which will guide the adaptation of a program in response to a particular change. So we will take a complexity theory approach, and how this is going to work is we will take 5 principles of complexity theory that have been identified as key for understanding and managing change in higher education. And for details of that, one could refer to the reference indicated here. So the 5 principles are networks, emergence, self-organization, feedback, and agility. And it's interesting to note that these 5 principles are aligned with 5 of the strategic themes of the university through strategic goals that have been identified to achieve in order to realize these strategic themes. So we're talking about building purposeful partnerships. So this is collaborations, which will contribute to the excellence in teaching and learning. There's the mention of a personalized student experience and transformational change. Then we have to foster interdisciplinary and interprofessional teaching. So we're empowering the students to participate in the learning community with staff. So we work together. We want to be an institution of continual learning. There's again a learning organization, and then the sustainability. But in addition to this, for a program to be effective, it will be important to have the appropriate balance between the who, the how, and the what. So for each of the principles, one would be looking at this. So if there's change in one aspect, this will necessitate a change in the other 2. So for example, in 2020, the change in our mode of delivery, so the what and the what resources were available for offering our programs necessitated upskilling the lecturers and the students, as well as rethinking how we engaged with our students. And this leads to the following matrix, which we propose here for guiding program evaluation. And it will have here the 5 principles, which are also aligned with the strategic themes of the university, and considering the who, the how, and the what, and finding that effective balance. As a way of illustration, I will now show how this framework can be used for evaluating and, in a sense, guiding the effective adaptation of our maths program to the changing higher education context. So first of all, if we consider networks, recalling our discussion about the conditions for emergence within a complex system, so within the program, the maths program, it may be important to develop meaningful learning and teaching opportunities and partnerships for appreciating the mathematics of all cultures, exploring different ideas, representations, reasoning approaches, sharing and discussing effective ways for engaging with mathematics. So who would be involved with this? We turn to the different agents within the program as a complex system. So there'd need to be networking or connections between the lecturers, the peer-to-peer facilitators, and the students for the benefit of the learning experience. And for this, it might be useful to actually have virtual and physical spaces where this happens. Also, the modules and the learning activities, there needs to be a clear indication of how this is connected with the mathematical knowledge and mathematical proficiency that is evolving through the program. Our students would also then appreciate maths as being more meaningful, useful, and actually experience that satisfaction of really doing maths and the mathematical discovery. So one can consider what resources you might need, and in the faculty and some other work I've done, one could also use the legitimation code theory frameworks for achieving some of this. With regards to emergence, so emergence, one other aspect was how do we bring the research into it, because that's how mathematics emerges for mathematicians. You engage in these research kind of activities, so lecturers could integrate research into the curriculum. And this would hopefully help students to gain confidence in their reasoning abilities, their capacity for logical thought, reflection, explanation, and justification of the way they go about reasoning in the mathematics space. But to achieve this, we need to also think, how would this be done? And a thought here would be we would need to shift the focus from assessment or feedback on procedural fluency, conceptual understanding, to a more holistic assessment or feedback on how the students have grown in their mathematical proficiency and creativity, and also engage with opportunities for research. So the what would need to be in place, what resources would we need here? I'm thinking also in terms of a project, a capstone project, and also virtual and physical spaces for that idea generation and those open discussions. Regarding self-organization, at the university, we are very much familiar with the hybrid learning initiative, and it's something that we've taken on in the maths program, developing hybrid learning units. And these have been more for individual engagement with core concepts. At the moment, they're being utilized for upskilling. So this helps us to say, how could we distinguish that individual understanding from a more collaborative and collective understanding? And how do we align our various activities in achieving that? One could maybe use the in-person activities for more of that cooperation rather than for the information transfer. And what may evolve is that who is involved with all of this would be that the lecturers and teachers bring their different attributes and to the discussions, they engage, they listen, and appreciate each other's understandings and connections between the mathematical ideas, and they start organizing these in their minds to gain some further understanding. In the recent workshop on program renewal, it was decided that we need to assess the impact of the mathematics program on the mathematical culture. So that includes the perceptions of our students and our prospective students and those that haven't actually taken up the offer to come to Stellenbosch to study maths. What is the impact on learning, teaching, the mindset, on the academic journey of our students? Some initiatives in this have been the culture of listening through a project called the SAKU, but there are other things that we could employ to listen and capture feedback more continuously so that the students of the moment also benefit from changes. So various agents in the program would need to be involved in this, in providing this feedback, engaging with the feedback, making sense of the feedback. As we heard when we were thinking about the learning futures, students almost feel they need to experience a personalized journey in developing their mathematical proficiency. We have students who have different starting points, they have different ways of engaging with the material, they have different goals of why they want to do this maths program. And this inspires lecturers to offer a more flexible, differentiated teaching, learning, and feedback approach. And this is being done in some of the modules already. But in order for it to have an impact on the program, we might need to unbundle the maths program and allow for different learning pathways, different modes of engaging. But we always have to go back again and also look at the resources, the achievability, and for that we would need to do sustainability analysis and look at some evidence as we plan such interventions across the whole program. So thank you. Through this talk, I've taken the view that a program is about fostering the emergence of learning, of creativity, of imaginative and critical perspectives. And taking that view, we've shown that it is feasible to follow a complexity theory approach for understanding to what extent emergence occurs. And we did this for the mathematics kind of program. And it has also shown us how we could participate in creating possible futures for this program. So thank you very much for your time, for listening to my escape into this world of complexity theory.
Thank you very much from my side. And I see there's some clapping and some comments as well coming in already in the chat, Ingrid. I'm going to hand over to Karen Cattell-Holden just to facilitate the discussion and the questions that's coming in. Karen, we've got about 15 minutes. I think we should try and end at about 5:02, so as to give people some chance to move to their next meetings. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Antoinette, and thank you very much, Ingrid, for a really thought-provoking presentation that I think could take us a long way towards thinking about program renewal and program evaluation from a very different perspective. Thank you. I want to go back to the first question that is in the chat just before we invite some other questions. And that was from Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, I'm going to read your question, but please come in if you would like to comment. He says, I'm worried about the potential negative effects of tracking flow-through rates. It gets a lot of attention. It is obviously easy to calculate and possibly a significant contributor to why it attracts so much attention. It seems like complexity theory could usefully help with this problem of tracking quality, as it were. Would you like to comment, Ingrid?
Yeah, I just have to read it a bit more carefully. So flow-through rates, I assume you mean the throughput rates of the students in terms of the marks. So yes, I agree that the complexity theory helps us to look at more aspects of the learning of our students, and it's not entirely captured in the current process of assigning marks to their understanding. So I feel that the complexity theory could help with tracking, if you want to say that, but also stimulating that emergence of learning as opposed to just following one assessment from the next.
Thank you, Ingrid. Mr. Burgess, does that answer your question?
Thanks. Yes, I think the difficulty I still have, and it's just how to do that. So I understand kind of the framework, but yeah. So, but maybe that's not the appropriate question for this forum. But that would be something I would wonder about.
Thank you. Then there was a question from Dr. McKay. Really speaking about the institutional environment at SU with regard to incorporating complexity theory. How do we engage with adapting to changing external and internal contexts with agility when we are so constrained by our 100-year-old inflexible timetabling system?
Yeah, I think that's where it's the balance that we have with the who, the how, and the what. So if we want to change how we do things in response to external, internal contexts, then the resources will also need to be reconsidered. And by resources, I also mean the timetable and the facilities. Yeah.
Thank you, Ingrid. And Dr. Streever commented also on this question, saying it is ironic as COVID forced us to move online, and the frustration with that and the level of engagement may force us back to mostly face-to-face. I believe the solution to this lies in using both modes, which can overcome timetable and physical facility issues. Ingrid, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think maybe I don't know which field you're in, I'm afraid, but from my own perspective, sometimes it's maybe we haven't really changed how we engage with the students and how we make use of those face-to-face spaces. So is it more for information transfer? What is the real value of that space? And maybe we haven't thought about that enough. And I think that's where complexity theory helps us to look at different dimensions and see what's achievable. So if one thing changes, how do we adapt the rest of the system to do that, to not try and drag on what we've done in the past?
All right, thank you, Ingrid. And there was then also a question from Professor Debbie Blaine, saying that she's interested in different cultural understandings or perspectives on mathematics. Could you expand or give some insight? It's an interesting question.
Maybe we can chat about that another time, Debbie. So I've been playing around a bit with that also in the LCT framework. But I think there's a lot of yeah, so mathematics is often seen, I don't want to get myself into a whole big debate right now about this, yes. But sometimes what we convey in maths doesn't always give an appreciation for where some of those ideas might have come from. And bringing that into the discussions can also help the students with understanding the material. So I'm happy to chat a bit more about that at another time, but not right now.
Thank you. Then there is another question from Alison Litwa. Could you explain maths as having a horizontal knowledge structure?
Okay, so in maths we have different domains of maths. So you have like algebra, and you'll have logic, and they will each have their own language, as it were. So the kinds of structures that you use, or the level at which you are reasoning about something. And they will also have their own reasoning approaches. So when you're within a particular domain, you totally into that way of thinking. So we have an algebraic approach, which might think, if you think beyond maths, it could be looking, if you're trying to describe a particular concept, you might be looking at the properties of that particular object. And you'll be able to reason about them. And if you looked at it from maybe a topological perspective, a different approach in maths, you'd be looking more at the individuals that you are considering, so particular things. So it's not about the properties that they have, but individuals that have those properties. So it's a different perspective. Each one brings a different perspective to one particular concept in the real world, and the way you reason about them is quite different. So in maths, we typically would have a set of axioms which we take as being true, and it would depend on that perspective you're taking as to what those axioms are. Then they might be not. I mean, you might not see the connection between them initially. And then also how you reason about it would be different, because you're looking at it from a different perspective. So I hope that gives a feeling from a non-maths perspective as well. And I've used this quite a lot in my research as a mathematician, in understanding how you reason about programs. So you look at it from different perspectives, but there are ways also to connect them. So in maths, we have different domains as areas of research, but also the connections between these different domains establish areas of research as well. So typically, you work in one domain as opposed to looking at different domains. So it is helpful to look across different ones, but within that, you need to understand different ways of reasoning. Yes, so Karen would be able to give you some advice on that. So the horizontal knowledge structures, of course, come from Bernstein as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. I'm just looking here at quite a lengthy question from Dr. Hanekom. Dr. Hanekom, would you like to put your question yourself, please, and just unmute your mic?
Yes, it wasn't actually a question. It was just a remark on what Albert Strever said about how ironic it was that COVID forced us to move online, but that it didn't really bring change. And I had opened this morning, because it's for a class I'm going to use this afternoon, an article by Cope and Kalantzis that basically said the main point was, in pedagogical terms, implementing technology need not produce reform. And I think that's a lot of what happened during this time. Videos of lectures were put on, but the didactic form didn't change. Moving from print to e-textbooks, but yeah, nothing really changed, and that's why going back seemed easier. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I see that there's a hand up, but I'm not sure who the hand belongs to. Would you like to put your question, please?
It's Peter.
Hello, Peter.
It's Peter. Thank you. Ingrid, thank you. Really interesting presentation. But one of the challenges I think we have, as you know, is this is on a program level. So in essence, it's easy within mathematics or within chemistry to say this is the program outcomes. But the reality is also we teach modules which are like service modules where we have 15 or whatever different programs in those modules. So that I think is really the challenge we have within the core of a program. It's easy to take this approach. The challenge is the interconnectedness to the modules which are not the core, if you will, within the program. So maybe you can just comment on that challenge and how that feeds into the overall program renewal.
Yeah, so obviously I'm also aware of that in maths, that most of our class is made up of students that are doing it in service of other programs that they are enrolled for. That brings its own diversity, but we also in science are trying to understand the actual programs themselves. So sometimes our students seem to get lost and we're not connecting with those students that are actually within the program. So I think the complexity theory approach of perhaps just looking at the maths program and the students in that and seeing how are we connecting with those students and making them feel that sense of inclusion and direction might also be helpful, especially for our modules or our disciplines where most of our focus is on the service teaching.
All right, thank you very much for that question and your answer, Ingrid. There is a comment also here now by Debbie Blaine. I think that if this is how lecturers moved into the hybrid mode, then this is absolutely true. Lecturers who change the way they teach, digitally transform their modules instead of digitizing their modules, have had far more success and moved their teaching forward. Any comment on that, Ingrid?
Yeah, I agree with you, Debbie. That's for sure. So one needs to look at the various factors that put into place. And yes, at the time it seemed we were in crisis mode, but now we're no longer in that space. So it is good to reflect on that and see what can we take forward and how can we change it. So even the way we assess and what are we assessing, how are we assessing, may have an influence.
I just want to see the message that has just come in. Okay, that is just about the feedback link. There's a new feedback link that has been posted. The previous one seemed to be defective, so please just use the second link to provide feedback. Okay, can I just ask, are there any other questions? I think we've now exhausted the comments and the questions in the chat. Any other questions, colleagues? We've got a few minutes left.
I think, Karen, we've exhausted the comments for now, although I did see a request for a workshop in the chat as well, Ingrid. So, so I think we're not going to let you go that easily. So, Karen, with your permission, I would like to thank Ingrid for this wonderful presentation and presenting this alternative model here this afternoon. I think we get so fixated sometimes on the logic model, which I know quite intimately in terms of its linear flow and its outputs and its outcomes, and then immediately going to instruments and indicators. We just flow into that. And I think one of the comments also, then we try and look for indicators, and we look for throughput rates and success rates of modules, et cetera, et cetera. And in the process of oversimplifying, I think we lose touch of the complexity of programs. And I think that is also what you really, really reminded us of this afternoon. So thank you very much for that. We're not going to let you off the hook. There was a request for workshops, so I would love to learn more. And I think there might be other colleagues that would love to learn more as well. So with that, I would like to thank you again. Thank you so much. We are thrilled to have you as one of our teaching fellows. And I think this is a concrete output this afternoon, the type of work that you've been doing as a teaching fellow and the immense value it doesn't only add to your faculty and to your programs, but potentially institution-wide, that type of really good research that we need at the institution. So thank you also for volunteering to become a teaching fellow and going through that whole application process. And then last but not least, colleagues, I see it's plus 55. At one stage, it was plus more than 60 people attending this seminar this afternoon. So thank you so much also to everybody taking the time during their lunch hour to also attend Ingrid's talk. And we look forward to the next learning and teaching seminar. I see there are some issues with regards to the feedback form, still some issues Please just send an email for your feedback. And I see the Resh also came in and said, Ingrid, thanks for your fantastic presentation. And there's lots of other thanks coming in as well. I'm not going to read all of them. But thank you so much, Ingrid, again. Colleagues, have a wonderful afternoon and looking forward to the next seminar and Ingrid's workshop. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody, for your time and attention. It was lovely.
Thank you. Bye-bye.